All right, if you can hear me, please say something in the chat so I will see that you can hear me fine and I'll know that the sound system is working as expected. I'm not seeing any comments. Does that mean that you're not hearing me? Okay, can you hear me? I want to put something in the chat box if you can hear me. I want to make sure that I'm coming across loud and clear. So let me know if you can hear me fine. I want to make sure that we are live where we're supposed to be and that things are going well. So I'm not hearing from anyone. We have all of our viewers on, but I'm not hearing anyone. Or I'm not seeing any comments. So please respond so I will know that we are doing what we're supposed to be doing here. All right, our number of viewers has gone down. So let's see here. Apparently, we're having an issue. Let's see. All right. I'm not seeing any comments. So say something. I want to make sure that we are being seen here. Okay. All right. Looks like everybody says that you're able to hear me. Okay, good. Let me get the echo for my voice shut off in the background, and I will take care of that. Okay, I have switched webinar platforms for tonight, so just give me just a second so I can make sure that we're good here. All right. All right, can you still hear me fine? All right, I had to make a couple of adjustments, and so let me know if you are still hearing me correctly. Make sure we're not missing anything here. Looks like, all right. Trying to find the correct location here. All right. Walter, make a comment, would you please? That way I'll know that you are hearing me correctly. Or have I stopped? All right. Should not be getting sound from there. All right, good. I'm gonna roll with this just exactly like it is. I'm just a little bit having a little difficulty seeing what's supposed to be happening here. All right, let's talk about problem solving skills tonight. I just want to make sure that I can see your questions. So just stick with me. If we, and I'll come back and make sure we've got the questions answered as we go. So let me give you a little bit of background and a little bit about me. I had a brilliant debate partner when I was in high school who took the time to teach me how to think, which I thought was amazing because he's just 2 years older than me. And we were in high school. He was a senior, I was a sophomore. And he taught me some incredibly valuable thinking skills, which I've never seen anywhere else since that time. So, and I began, once I started teaching school, I started sharing those same thinking principles with my students, and it was amazing what they were able to accomplish. As a matter of fact, one of those students is a business partner of mine today. So, um, and that was 25 years ago when I taught those skills in the class that he was in. So this is something that I have perfected over that 25 years. I've got this fine-tuned down to this is how you systematically think through a problem from the beginning where the problem presents itself to where you actually get to the end and you see an actual solution. So what I'm going to share with you is how we go about doing that. And I'm going to refer to one of the greatest thinkers of all time, Albert Einstein, who made this comment: "It is not that I am so smart, it's just that I stay with problems longer." Now, what caused him to be able to stay with problems longer? What made it possible for him to be devoted to something from the beginning to the end? That's a major question that I have. And so I want to share with you what I have learned as I've studied the life and the thinking processes of Albert Einstein, as well as somebody else. And so let's talk about that other somebody else. What I'm going to teach you tonight is going to be a process of systematic thinking, which is a hybrid of the processes of Albert Einstein and Socrates. All right. Um, I just got a note from someone who said that they didn't get the link. So let me grab this link and send it to him. And as we do this, so we're talking about the thinking process of Albert Einstein and Socrates. So those are the two people that we'll be referring to frequently. Now, we don't have the quotes from Socrates, so I'm going to have to give you I give you some. Hold on just a second. I've got to get this done. There we go. Now I've got it taken care of. I'm sorry about that. I want to make sure we get everybody in here if we can. So this is a process. This is a hybrid of the process and the thinking of Albert Einstein and Socrates. We're going to learn to question like Socrates, and we're going to learn how to use imagination and creativity like Einstein. So we'll put those two processes together. And as we put those processes together, you're going to see the value that comes with that. But before we begin, there's some things I have to share with you before we begin. And the first thing is I'm going to teach you some business laws, some laws of thinking, some laws that are fundamentally built into our everyday lives. Part of the way that the universe is designed, part of the way that things just work. And these are designed by the creator into the universe to accomplish specific purposes. Now, the better we understand those laws, the easier it will be for us to think. So I'm going to run through some brief laws here. I'm just going to give you a brief overview of the law, and then you're going to see how that plays out in developing a systematic solution for problems. The first one is the law of averages. The more times that a thing is done, the greater the likelihood that you will get the desired result. The reason why I say you have to have a system for thinking is because that you're doing the same things over and over and over again. And just simply by playing the laws of averages, the law of averages, you're going to have a greater likelihood of getting the result that you desire. So that's the reason why a system becomes so important. If a thing is done poorly, even if it's done enough times, it will improve by the sheer law of averages. So one of the laws that we're going to utilize in developing a system for solving problems is the law of averages. The next law I want you to look at is the law of evidence. The law of evidence. The object is to get all of the facts. Now, this comes from a very complicated quote from Napoleon Hill, but I've tried to make it a little bit simpler. So listen carefully to what I'm about to say. You will do well if, in the absence of proven facts, you base your judgment only upon those things supported by evidence and of no harm to other people. So in other words, when in the absence of all of the facts, only deal with the things that have evidence attached to them, only those things that are supported by actual evidence. And don't allow yourself to get caught up into something that would be harmful thinking to somebody else. So the law of evidence, you've got to get all of the facts, but you don't always get all of them at the same time, and you can't support all of them by evidence at the same time. So it's so important that we follow this principle of the law of evidence and that we suspend judgment and we don't make decisions until we have enough evidence to move forward. All right. The next law that I want to take a look at is the law of concentration. This one is so incredibly important. I had an interesting discussion with a teacher who teaches children with autism and Asperger's on the spectrum of those difficulties, and we talked about the law of concentration. She was using writing as a means of helping her students to develop their thinking processes, and so we began to discuss the need for the law of concentration. And what that is the act of focusing the mind upon a given desire until the way and the means for its realization have been worked out and successfully put into operation. In other words, I just wanted her to take her young students and have them begin to concentrate so deeply that it's not just a pretty glass. It's a glass that has been etched. It's a glass that the light glistens off of. It's a glass that causes the light to refract in various ways. And so you begin to concentrate and you focus your mind upon something until you successfully work out and put into operation the desired outcome. And there are two key elements for the components, or there are two key components of concentration. The first one is habit. And that's the reason why I say you have to have a system for thinking. It's a system, it's a habit. It's something that I do on a regular basis. It's something that I do consistently. It's something that I do every time it becomes a habit. How many times have you thought about using habit as it applies to thinking? Do you develop habits for thinking? Very important. So the first key component of concentration is you have to have a habit. Second thing is to have a proper environment. I'm kind of a nutcase about environment. I have certain things that I have surrounded myself with, and I feel like they almost have to be present. And I have two books that I keep with me everywhere, and they have absolutely nothing to do with anything that I do. But one of them is called Workshops, Jigs, and Fixtures. And there is page after page after page of the greatest stuff I've ever seen in my life. A guy taking a table saw and using it to cut a circle. That takes incredible creativity to take a saw that was designed to cut a perfect straight line and use it to cut a circle. Just causes me to think in a different way. Causes me to realize I haven't concentrated to the point that I would like to. And so that's part of my environment. I have a particular style of ink pen that I love to use, and that has to be part of my environment. In this highly digital world that we live in, I still have paper stuck on the walls that I can write on because that's my environment. That's what I learned how to think in. And so I return to the system, the habit, and a return to the environment, the conditions around me, so that I might be able to concentrate. I might be able to focus my attention, so that I might be able to shut the other things out and focus my mind upon the given desire until the ways and the means for its realization have been worked out and successfully put into operation. The next law is the law of compensation. Now, this is where it really begins to get important. You are always fully compensated for what you put in, whether it's positive or negative. The longer you go without compensation, the greater the return. Interest is always earned on the investment. I see these get-rich-quick schemes that people come up with, and how that you're going to be able to take this one little thing that we just sold to you, and you're going to make $580,000. No, you're not, because you're not fully compensated for purchasing a product for $200 and being able to make $500,000 for it. Just can't happen. The odds again are grossly against that. The law of compensation is that you will be fully compensated for what you put in, And so when I think about thinking, I have to put in the time to think. I have to put the time in to do that. And sometimes I look forward to being able to take a road trip so I can use that 5 or 6 or 7 hours that I'm driving as an opportunity to think, because that's an investment that I'm making, knowing that I will be properly compensated for that. And interest is always earned on that investment. The next law I want you to see is the law of the harvest. You're always compensated in exactly the same form as you planted. If you plant corn, guess what? You get corn. You always get in direct proportion to what you plant. You plant one seed, on an ear of corn, you get 830 kernels back. It is amazing how the law of harvest works, but harvest always follows planting. For some reason, we want to rush things and think that we're going to be able to get before we put the effort in. And the harvest can't precede the planting, and it can't happen without it. And so thinking is part of that sowing and reaping part of the law of the harvest. And it will help us to govern our system for problem solving if we understand that we have to put in something in order to get something back. And then the final one I want to take a look at here, or the next one I want to take a look at here, is the law of attraction. There's a few more that I want to cover. But the law of attraction, like always attracts like. The acorn always attracts everything that's required for growing an acorn. This is so important. It never attracts those things that are needed for a banana. And so if I focus my attention on the desired outcome, not the problem itself, but the desired outcome, if I give that the proper thought processes, if I apply my system to that thing, then it will begin to attract the things that I need in order to make that happen. Because that's the real magic of the law of attraction, is that you start to think those things through. And I'm going to give you an example of that, something that happened to me about 2 hours ago as I was preparing for this webinar. And I'll give you a clear example of that, because I honestly believe that in the law of attraction, that like always attracts like. And if I'm thinking about things, if I concentrate, if I'm focusing my attention on the desired outcome, not the problem, but on the desired outcome, then what ends up happening is that I start getting the things that I need to accomplish that outcome. And I grew up in rural America. I grew up on a farm, on a cattle ranch. We raised everything that we ate. And I remembered something as I was putting down the law of attraction. And that is this little thing called the companion planting. And that is that there are certain crops that grow better when put together. And we're kind of the same way. I think better when I'm in a certain environment. I have some people that when they show up in the environment, I shut down. I have some people that when they show up in the environment, I rise to the occasion. And that's companion planting. That's like attracting like. That's getting the things that I need in order to be able to accomplish my given goal. And so that's that law of attraction. The next one is the law of effect. And this really impacts the way that we think and problem solve. You get more of what you reinforce or reward. By reinforcing an activity, you get more out of it. I experienced this all the time when I was a trainer. When you need a trainer when change is about to happen. And so I experienced this a lot. The people who looked forward to the change found it really easy to grasp all the things necessary to make the change happen. Those who were resistant found it nearly impossible to master the details. When I was a trainer for an insurance company almost 20 years ago now, we were moving to laptop style enrollments, and I had people who would, as soon as I would start, they would say, I can't learn to do this because I'm not a geek. And what would happen is that they would never learn to do it because they were resisting. Those people who came in and says, I don't have a clue what you're going to talk about, but we're going to figure this thing out. And they began to focus their attention on the positive, the desired outcome, and they were able to master the details. The law of effect. This is so important. I hear people say, you've got to face your fears. Well, the problem is that you're putting too much focus on the word fear. You're getting more of what you're rewarding. You're honoring that fear by talking about it. Instead, start talking about mastering your opportunity. And it changes your perspective. The law of effect kicks in and you get more of what you reinforce or reward. If I want to master something, it's a lot better than I'm afraid, but I'm going to face the fear. If I tell myself I'm afraid, but I'm going to face the fear, I'm honoring or I'm rewarding or I'm reinforcing the fear. Same thing's true about if I see this problem, and I've said it several times now, instead of focusing on the problem, now the whole purpose of this webinar is to teach you how to problem solve. But the first thing that you have to do is you got to look beyond the problem to the desired outcome. What do I want to accomplish with this? You know, there's some problems you just walk away from because it's not worth my effort. But sometimes when I understand what the outcome is going to be, I can focus my attention there and the problem seems to just get solved. And that's the magic of the law of effect. The next law I want you to take a look at here is the law of applied effort. This one's so true. These laws are universal laws. They're built into how the world and the universe operates. But the law of applied effort, all worthwhile achievements can be accomplished by hard work. I just go crazy when these people do they make these fake videos and they're standing in front of this mansion and they're washing their Lamborghini, all of which has been rented for the time. And the reason why I know that is because I've seen the guys do it. Hard work. Anything that offers a reward without effort is a lie. Sometimes that hard work is thinking. And that's the reason why you have to have a good system for that. That's the reason why you have to know how to approach the solutions to the problems. But it's still work. And if it weren't hard work, then why do so few people actually do it? That's my point. All right. The law of applied effort. So important that we grasp that. And the final one I want to talk about tonight is the law of obsolescence. Whatever exists is already in the process of becoming obsolete. I love to do this webinar this time of the year because as we look around, we see all the leaves changing. We see snow starting to fall. Everything that all the grass starts to turn brown. All the stuff that was once thriving and living and abundant is obsolete. Now there'll come a time when it's going to change again, but everything in our world is in the process of becoming obsolete. I'm a day older today than I was yesterday, which means that I'm in the process of becoming obsolete. That's a little hard to handle sometimes. But the tools that we're going to share here can either help you to overcome this, are designed to help you overcome this law. You can either use them or you can watch the world pass you by. So let me give you 6 principles tonight that'll help you to solve problems. And this is where we're going to focus our attention for the remainder of the evening. Now, if I could find where the comments are being made at, I'd like to see if anybody has any comments. So give me just a second to look here. I want to make sure we're not missing anything. All right. I see that I don't see any new comments, though. I see some comments having to do with me asking if you could all hear me. So since that time, hasn't been any comments. So thank you. I will check again later. So let's take a look at the 6 principles that I want to teach you tonight. I'm going to give you these 6 things that'll help you to become a problem solver. So notice in the center we have problem solving. That's what we want to do. We want to become problem solvers. We want to learn how to create a system for solving problems. And I'm going to walk you through these 6 things. And for some strange reason, I mind map everything, but I always go counterclockwise. So when you look at this, we're going to start up in the, what would be about 11 o'clock, and we're going to go counterclockwise. And the first thing I have to do in order to become a great problem solver is I have to suspend my judgment. I have to stop thinking that I have the answer before I ever think. What brought this about 25, almost 30 years ago now, what brought this about was I created this system of thinking to counter what was being taught in high school and college. And that is, you're going to do a research paper and you're going to start with an outline. How in the world can I start with an outline? That's assuming that I know everything. And I've just put a limit on how much research I'm actually going to be able to do. So the first thing I have to do is I have to realize that I don't know everything that there is to know about this subject. I have to suspend my judgment. And I'm going to look at that in some detail in just a minute. The next thing is I have to empower some emotions. I have to empower some emotions. So give me a second while I change the screen here. I want to show you something that happened to me just a little bit ago. Okay? So stick with me while I switch the screen. And I'm going to bring something up here that I want to take a look at. This is a conversation I had 2 hours before this webinar went live. And I had shared with a friend of mine this process, that mind map that I have up on the screen right here. And as I put that mind map up and showed that to her, she said, empower emotions, that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Why are you talking about emotions having to do with thinking? And so I gave an example. The example was, if I ask you this question, should we have beauty contest? Then that gets a yes or no answer, right? But I don't have as much emotion attached to that. It's just yes or no, because it's a question asked that can be answered with a yes or no. But if I flip that question around and turn it into a statement, I've empowered emotions. If I ask the question, instead of saying, should we have beauty contest, if I said instead that beauty contests are the remnant of a male-dominated society, now what happens? If you're a man or a woman, all of a sudden, that statement, because it is assumed to be correct, that statement causes somebody to go, there's no way, you are dead wrong and I'm going to prove it. Or somebody who could say, yes, it's obvious that it's a remnant of that, and here's the reasons why. That second step in the mind map to empower emotions is so important. So this is what this lady said to me. Man, I read that last statement and I noticed an immediate emotional reaction because I wanted to disprove. That is exactly what I'm talking about. Which proved your point and made me really mad. She was trying to prove to me that emotions weren't helpful. And what happened was she realized that I was right about that. And I said, statements empower emotion. That's the point. However, you can just say beauty contest and I will see red turn into the Incredible Hulk. Now, I get that. But the point is that when we make a comment as a statement, that statement is assumed to be a fact that either must be proven or disproven. And it makes a powerful argument. I think what's happened in our educational system is that we have taken the emotion out of it and we've replaced it with an answer machine. And answers are not solutions. Hopefully you heard that one. Answers are not solutions. Answers are just how you get past the test, but they are not emotions. Hold on a second. I got to do this right here. So give me just a minute. Come back to the correct screen here. So we're back to, we've suspended our judgment. Now we empower the emotions. We empower the emotions by turning things into statements rather than questions. We turn the problem into a statement rather than a question. The other thing that does is it helps us to break it down into smaller pieces. Okay, we'll talk about that more at another time. The number three, the third thing that I need to be able to do is I start questioning everything. I start questioning everything. Now, I have a process that I use, and I use it every single time. My wife can walk home and she can see all these writing on the wall. I mean, all over the place. And she'll say, oh, somebody had a problem today and you're trying to solve it. Yep, that's exactly what I do. And I have a system that I follow from beginning to end. And number three in that system is to question everything. I'll show you what that means in just a minute. Then the fourth thing is that we're going to discover the answers. Discover the answers. And I'm going to give you two things that you're going to do with that. Two things that you can do with discovering the answers that'll be incredibly powerful for you. Number five, you develop those discoveries. And I have a really simple process for doing that. I'm an old school guy who lives in a high-tech world and enjoy the living daylights out of the high tech. But I use a file card. And I answer the questions. I give them the things that they need, and then I put the answers on the file cards, and I begin to arrange them because I can move them around, and I can arrange them again, and I can look for holes, and I can find gaps, and I can do things. That's developing the discovery. We'll talk about that in just a minute. And then finally, I perfect the solutions. I perfect the solutions. I focus my attention. I polish that. I make it better. I understand where those solutions plug in at. I look for gaps. The most amazing thing is when you find questions that don't have answers, then you have a product that the public may need. Okay, so there's some really cool stuff that you can do around these 6 principles for problem solving. This system has 6 steps involved in it, and you follow them from beginning to end. But notice that the perfect the solutions goes back to the problem solving, because what happens is that you take that through that process. Remember the law of obsolescence? The law of obsolescence tells me that whatever that is may be in the process of going obsolete. And so I've got to look down the road. I've got to figure out what's going to happen next. How did we get from here to there? And we take that to the next step. But those 6 principles, let's take a look at them in detail. Okay? First one, suspend judgment. 3 things to keep in mind here. You're looking for accurate thoughts. Accurate thoughts. Accurate thinking is so important. We have too much false information that's going on in our world today. We have too much fake news. We have too much stuff that gets shared. And when people Google things, what they find out is what's been popular, not what's correct. And so accurate thinking is extremely important. All of us have biases. All of us have a bias. All of us have things that affect and impact and alter our ability to be able to handle accurate thinking. And I have later, I'm going to give this to you. I'm not going to give it to you tonight, but later I'm going to give to you an affirmation that I use every time I have to tackle a problem. And it basically goes like this. I, Eric Mulford, realize I don't know everything there is to know about this subject. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to pursue it thoroughly. I'm going to look at all of the evidence and I'm going to seek out the accuracy of the truth, even if it takes me someplace other than where I thought I was going to go. And that affirmation helps me to deal with the importance of the accuracy of thinking, helps me to deal with the biases. And then the third thing, this is so important. I call this the change factor. All of us have had that experience where somebody, something, something came along that changed our mind. We've all had some point in our life where somebody, something changed our mind. I had that moment in my life when I was a freshman in high school. And I was determined that I was going to ruin the career of my high school principal. He was determined he was going to turn me around. And thankfully, he won. And remember the law of reward and the law of effect, which is you get more of what you reward. He became, after high school, he became one of my best friends. And I frequently thanked him. And we would have these times when we would get together and we would hang out and we would talk about what caused him to have that thought, what caused him to look beyond my fault and see somebody that was worth spending some time with, to see somebody that was worth pouring his life into. And I rewarded the change factor. If you learn to reward those things that change your thinking, you'll get more of what you reward. That's the reason why I went through those laws first, because when you understand them, then you can apply each one of these 6 steps to accurately going through the system for solving problems. Herbert Spencer said this, and I love this. I've heard this multitude of times, but I've been using this for more than 20 years. There is a principle, which is a bar against all information, which is proof against all argument, and which cannot fail to keep a man in everlasting ignorance. This principle is contempt prior to examination. Solomon said it like this: a fool answers a matter before he hears it. Contempt prior to examination. I have to suspend my judgment because it's going to get in my way. The great thing when I was a debate coach was that I was teaching young students how to change positions every hour and 10 minutes. They would take one side 1 hour, the other side an hour later. And it caused them to have to suspend their judgment. Such an important thing to learn when you're young, because it's going to serve you well when you get older. There's a lot of other principles that fall into that, flexibility and a whole bunch of other things, flexibility and thought. But those 3 things, if you'll grab them on suspending judgment, it will put you on the right path to thinking clearly so that you can solve problems. The next one, empower emotions. We use statements instead of questions. We take this question and we turn it into a statement. Because when you take a question can be very broad. But when you take the question and you turn it into a statement, you're now taking it into tinier pieces. You're taking tiny slices of that thing. When I made the comment earlier about the beauty contest, and I said it's a remnant of a male-dominated society, that's just a slice of the problem. It's not the whole problem. It's just a slice of it. But that slice empowered the emotions. And so it helps me to slice it down into smaller chunks, but it gives me that emotional drive that I need. And the second thing is that it becomes a theory to support or reject. When you hear a definitive statement, you immediately decide where you stand. You do. It's just an automatic thing. You hear a definitive statement and you say, I agree or I don't agree. But as soon as you say, I agree, then you start to rationalize why you agree.
If you say, I don't agree, then you start to rationalize. And then you've got to examine that, because now I've applied judgment to it. So I got to think past that judgment. I got to think past that bias and see where the evidence takes me. When you hear a definitive statement, you immediately decide where you stand. You either support the statement or you reject it. Rarely, if ever, are you neutral. It is this natural tendency to support or reject that you want to trigger. Okay? Now, if you have to, if at any point in time you have to go, I just got to throw this out here. There is a shared URL in the notes that you're looking at, and you will be able to get these notes from tonight in that URL. Okay? So that's number 2, empower emotions. Number 3, answer the questions. You have to own the answer. You have to own the answer. I have skipped question everything. How did I skip question everything? That slide is missing. I'm sorry. Let me deal with the questions. Okay. Very simple. So I'll have to add these to the notes. I'll get them to you later. But catch this. When I say question everything, we make a definitive statement. Let's say, for example, that definitive statement is, because I used to love to use this one when I taught school, that homework does nothing to improve the quality of education. Now, as soon as I say that to a classroom full of students, guess what? They all agree with me. But my next statement is, so defend that position. And when they have to defend the position, they start to dig. Now, this is what I want you to do. I want you to learn how to ask a minimum of 20 questions. And so a minimum of 20 questions, because those 20 questions, 20, no less, 20, will help you to dig deeper. This is what happens. There's something magic that takes place in the 20 questions. Everybody I've ever done this with can come up with 5 off the top of their head. Whatever it is, I don't care what it is. They can come up with 5. If they work at it a little bit, they can come up with 7 or 8. But when they get to 8 or 9, they run into a brick wall. And the reason is because they've asked the who, what, when, why, how, where, the things that we've been taught to ask, but they haven't dug yet. And forcing yourself to have to ask 20 questions gets you past the barrier. And once you learn to do that, and listen to me very carefully, once you learn to do that, once you get past 13, 12, 13, 14, you won't stop. You'll begin to get finer and finer questions as you go. You'll begin to refine those questions as you go. Because look carefully at the question. Remember, this is the Socratic questioning. The questions begin to become additional questions. And once you get past the first 5, 6, 7, or 8, those are the questions that anybody can ask. And almost everybody's going to know the answer to. It's questions 12, 13, 14, 15, 26, 37, 41. That is that concentration. Remember the law of concentration? The more I focus my mind on something, the more I focus my mind on something, and I'm looking for the desired outcome, I begin to find the means, not only for accomplishing that, but the means for accomplishing it in the most successful manner. I told you the reason why I gave you those laws first is because if we learn to apply them to these 6 steps, what happens next puts you in a class all by yourself. So While I missed the slide, and I'm not even sure why it's not in that slide deck, but while I missed the slide about the questions, it's the most important piece of the puzzle. If you'll learn to ask a minimum of 20 questions, once you develop the process of this, and I'm going to offer to take you through that process. Once you learn to do that, you will find yourself easily coming up with 20 questions in less than 20 minutes. And when I taught this in high school, what I would do is I would require my students on Monday, the first day, to come up with 20 questions in the course of the hour. By the end of the week, they had less than 20 minutes to come up with 20 questions. And they would come up with questions as fast as they could write. Because once they learn to get past the barrier, it's where the magic happens. I was in a meeting one night, and a lady asked, she said, I've got this problem. I've been asked to write a blog for this business that I'm involved in, and I can't think of anything other than, and she rattled off 2 or 3 topics to write the blog about. And I asked her 12 questions in the span of 1 minute. And she said, "How did you do that?" I said, "It's trained mind that does that." And I wasn't being arrogant. It's just I have a systematic approach to thinking. And as soon as she stated what the problem was, I could immediately give her 12, 13, 14 questions as fast as they could come out of my mouth. And she said, "Now I've got more to write about than I ever dreamed possible." So now that brings us to the next step: answer the questions. And there's 2 things about answering the questions that you've got to grasp. The first one is you have to own the answer. You have to own the answer. And what that means is that if I don't agree with this, if this runs against my bias, I still have to own it, because it's supported by the evidence. The facts prove it to be true. So I have to own it. And when I do that, I do the second thing, and that is I empower the source. I give that source, which is the evidence that supports it. I give it the authority that it deserves. It takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of kahunas. It takes a big person to give power to the source where the evidence lies of the accurate truth. Answer the questions by owning the answer and empowering the source. Now, do you understand why emotion is such an important part of this? Can you feel the emotion that I have about this system? Hopefully you can, because I want you to get that. The next thing is you develop the discoveries. And I use 2 O's here: organize and outline. Organize and outline. And I hear these people talking about creating product. The first thing you do is you start with an outline. That's the last place you should start. You don't know enough to do an outline. I see the teachers that teach their students to do a research paper. You start with an outline. You don't know enough to do an outline. Albert Einstein said that if we knew enough to outline, we wouldn't do the research. Makes perfect sense. Outlines are a shortcut, right? Outline's supposed to be a shortcut. If you begin with the outline, you're starting to limit yourself to what you already know. And see, to solve the problem, you've got to get beyond what you already know. So we organize and we outline. And I told you earlier, what I do with the organization is I write the answers on a file card. And I've got the question and the answer. And now I can take those file cards and I can lay them out. And I can go, oh, these 3 go together. And these 2 go together over here. Well, here's one I didn't get an answer to. I wonder why there wasn't an answer to that. And you start thinking through How do these pieces fit together? Oh, these are related over here. There's a causal relationship between these things. And that causal relationship I can't ignore, because this won't happen unless this happens over here. Start to organize. That's developing the discoveries. And it's so important that we develop those discoveries, because that's what's going to give us the solution, is how we develop those discoveries. And the next one is you perfect the discoveries. This is where you apply creativity. This is where you apply imagination. And you start to develop that into something that becomes magical. Okay? Then I want to end with this. Albert Einstein said, in my experience, the best creative work is never done when somebody's unhappy. See, if I'm facing this problem and it's just making me crazy, and I'm upset about it, and I'm unhappy about it, I will never be at my creative best. I won't be. I need to be at my creative best. I need to be at a place where I can be filled with creativity that allows me to take the emotion, not the unhappy emotion, but the happy emotion. And see, the reason why I end with this slide is so important. I want you to grasp this, that happiness comes from knowing how and knowing why. If I can give you a system of thought that you can apply no matter what you run into, then I know the moment that thing comes up and I run into that problem, whatever it is, or I always call it the presenting problem. You know, the problem shows up like an armored guard. And I already know I've got a system that's bigger than you. I've got a system that's more powerful than you. I've got a system that can take you out. And I'm going to apply that system, and you're going to melt in its presence. Then I approach those problems one very happy hippie, right? Because then all of the imagination and all the creativity can come flowing in, and I can do my best work because I know that I have a system that when I apply the system, the problem's going to shrink, and I'll be able to achieve the solution, the desired outcome that's just beyond that armed guard that's standing at the door calling itself the presenting problem. Because I've got a solution that can do that. I've got a system that can do that, and that can lead me past the guard to the solution that's down the road. Okay, I'm going to check the comments again and see if anybody has a comment here that I need to address. All right, the last comments that I see from anybody have to do with you being able to hear my voice. So if you don't mind, please say something in the comment box so I will know that you are hearing, that you are still with me. Okay. I don't see any comments being made. And I obviously am going to have to find a solution to this, or this webinar platform is not going to work well for me. So, can anybody make a comment so that I can hear what's going on? I see Ginger has said still here. I'm assuming that you just said that. Is that correct? I don't see any comments having to do with the webinar content, or any questions having to do with the webinar content. So this is what I'm going to do. All right. No way I can cover all this in an hour. No way I could be able to take you through this entire process. Okay. And you can get the printouts, Ginger, right there under that shared URL to the attendees. You should see that down below, right below the video that you're looking at. So you should see it right there. And there are two things there. You will have the notes, which I just went through, missing that one slide, which so I'll go back and I'll amend that. Go ahead and print those off, and I'll just add an additional slide to go there. That's one thing. The second thing is that you will also have the mind map that I shared with you earlier, this mind map right here. So you'll have that mind map as well, because it's important to be reminded of that over and over again. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to do that. Then next week, I'm fixing to leave. I'm going to be gone first thing in the morning, and I'll be gone over the weekend. When I get back, I have some additional things that I'm going to share with the people who attended this webinar. Okay. So I have some additional things. I'm excited. This is my favorite topic. And yes, the missing slide will be added, Walter. And so you'll have that. I want to make sure that we don't forget that most important slide that there is. And then I also have a PDF file that I wrote a long time ago on the 20 categories of questions. There are 20 categories of questions. And not only do you have 20 questions, but you have 20 categories of questions. And what happens is that you'll begin to understand how valuable those questions are when you see that there's all kinds of questions that you can ask. There are probing questions. There are exposing questions. There are all kinds of things that will be important for you to know. So I'll get those 20 categories of questions. I'll get that to you on Monday, and then on Tuesday I'll give you some additional things. So for the next week, I'm going to kind of walk you through some of the additional things that I did not cover tonight, but things that are very much a part of that process. Those 6 steps I follow every single time. Every single time I follow exactly those 6 steps. Remember that one of the laws, do you remember when we were looking at the laws? One of the laws very early on was the law of averages right there. That law of averages reminds me that this is an acquired skill and I will get better at it. Even if I stink at it when I start, I will get better at it the more times that I do it. And I've done this to the point where this is second nature for me. And when it becomes second nature for you, you'll be the most attractive person in the room. People will want to flock to you, but you will attract people. Not needy people. You will attract people that can take what you have to share with them, and it can catapult their business, their life, and you into places that you never dreamed that you could go. But it is the law of averages, and I do play that law of averages. It's very, very important. It is a learned skill. And you've got to take what could be answered, as Walt's saying here, you've got to take what could be answered as a true or false or a yes or no, and you turn that into something that you can take apart piece by piece, systematically. And you squeeze it. I always talk about squeezing the problem until the solution pops out. And that's really what I want to teach you how to do. I wanted to give you an introduction to that tonight. That's the starting point. That's the place where we begin. And I'm going to share with you over the course of the next week some additional things I think you'll find helpful. And then we'll figure out what we do with it from there. Okay? But I'm very, very passionate about this topic, maybe more so than anything else that I do, because this is what we really need. We need problem solvers. We need real problem solvers in our world today. And the reason why we don't have problem solvers is because people ignore these laws. They forget that they apply. Wasn't anything I shared with you in those laws that was brand new. There's nothing there that's, shocking. We see it all around us every day. But the reason why it's important is that those laws we've never thought about applying to our thinking. And when I began to apply those laws to my thinking system, the system got better. Okay? So, having said that, I think we'll bring this webinar to a close. We are just about to the 1 hour time limit. I never do webinars past 1 hour. I think those people who do are missing something. I think if we hold it to 1 hour, I can give you more stuff than you can get in 1 hour. And so we're going to hold this to 1 hour, and we're going to bring this to a close. But you be looking forward to, when I get back, I'll be sharing those additional things with you that I talked about tonight on this webinar that will be coming down the road. You'll get a replay of the webinar. And I will edit a couple of little hiccups out of that, but you'll get the replay of the webinar. You'll get the notes. You get the mind map. I have a couple of ebooks that I'm going to give to you. I have the 20 categories of questions, and I have a sample of the file cards. Okay, so you'll get those things. I'll be looking forward to getting that out to you. Okay, thank you so much for joining me on this webinar tonight.